Something I think I've noticed is that I remember I used to have this pattern uh, some time back. Um, like I would for example, just meditate or just be, meditate in whatever I do in everyday life, and I would notice that my attention would just go somewhere, start to follow thoughts, and I would just catch myself uh, just going after those thoughts, and I'd judge myself. I would like be like, oh yeah, like feel bad for that or so on. And I think I've recently realized that that's just another game, of the thoughts of the ego. And I no longer do that. That like I noticed that something happened. I went somewhere and then I just return here, and that's it. Like I don't feel like I put any weight on that anymore. It doesn't feel positive or negative to me anymore. I just don't care so much of a lot of thoughts anymore, and that's a big thing to say because I have like it's been sort of a personal hell for me, especially with relationships. Um, Feeling that someone is neglecting me, not responding to my messages, or just thinking back to how I communicated, how I wrote. I still do that. If there is something that sort of touches me, some kind of a exchange by email, let's say, I know that when I'm like kind of like expecting for the reply, I will be going in my mind through like word by word what I wrote. I still do that, but I think it's not as severe anymore. But it has really been something that has been, I'd say, crippling, just in so many different ways for me.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, and Another realization I think I've had is how pretty much you could say everything I've done in my life has been in effort to be something, to achieve something. Like I've done like albums, music, very very mm, what's the word? I've tried to achieve great things with that and put so much effort into it, and then ultimately when I've been done with a project, just felt so hollow and betrayed, and just so like it was not what I was after. I didn't get the thing, I didn't get approval from my parents or whatever you call it. And I've come to a point where I just don't feel like doing anything right now. I've just let those things drop because I've went back to it so many times. I've tried again. Okay, so this is me, I need to create art, but then I just end up hurting myself, and then I just like drop it and go back to laying on the couch or playing games or whatever diversion, just being being however I happen to be, not trying to achieve anything because I just keep hurting myself.
Well, you're touching on such a relevant issue, and it's when we are hurt and when we are reacting from a starting point that is unhealthy, then we believe that the only thing we can do is doing or not doing. You know, there's I can create art to get all the admiration and appreciation and um response that I need. And when I'm not getting that, the only solution is not to create art. And the starting point in that is, I'm not okay the way that I am. I need to feel that I'm okay. So therefore I'm creating all this art. I'm not getting the approval that I need. So no, I'm not creating all this art. That's the starting point of it. And we're really becoming aware of that and the underlying need for approval, where that is pointing at, it's obviously you becoming aware of the approval, that urge to be approved. It's not from an external source. Whenever we do that either or thing, it's always when we have projected something into the external. And it's not at all where you need the approval to come from. It's not at all where, and even if you get the approval, even if the entire world see your art and say you're wonderful and you're magnificent and you're insightful and you're all of that, you will still feel hollow because it was not exactly what you needed. What you needed is from an internal source.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that.
And it's I'm not saying that you should do art or not do art. I'm just pointing at, how would it be if you have a different starting point? If you have a starting point of, no matter what type of art you make, the process of making it is the reward. The process of creating is the reward in itself. How other people are receiving it is beside the point, because you already had the payout. When I'm making my material, making the lessons, I'm making sure that while I'm doing it, I'm getting the full payout. I'm saying what I need to hear. Since everything we do is always about ourselves. So I'm expressing what I want to express, what I need to hear when I'm talking about the third or the fifth or whatever Fet I'm talking about. And the payout has fully happened when I finish the recording. All the payout has happened. Everything that I wanted to tell myself and I wanted to be said and to emphasize has happened. The payout has happened. So how people respond to it or react to it, how they use it or do not use it, it's completely irrelevant, because the payout has happened, if I can say it like that. Obviously, I'm thrilled and happy when somebody can use what I'm saying into their inquiry and into reaching a point of their insight and enjoying, like seeing Irene and hearing Irene the way that she talks about it. It makes me so thrilled and so happy. But my contentment, it's not dependent on anyone on the outside seeing and acknowledging what I'm doing. And it's the same with your art. If your art is coming from a space of full contentment while it's happening, you set people free to like it or not like it, because you are free to enjoy it or not enjoy it. And it's also, you can talk about that for length. Actually, do you want to say something about it? Because you have had that with your music.
Yeah, because I've been nodding my head, wildly, because I recognize everything you're saying. I also am a musician and went through a lot of this where so much of it comes down to your motivation for doing it. So with me, I found, after going through the, seeing through self and all of that stuff, a lot of the motivation to make music actually went away. because so much of that was actually bound into self, ego gratification stuff and really looking for those external accolades. And the more of that has kind of fallen away, the less interest there is in doing a lot. Sorry. Sorry. I tend to gesture with my hands, and I was like going to gesture on the table, which is holding the computer, and that makes for a very wobbly camera. So sorry about that. But what I found is that now and then, the urge to just pick up an instrument and start to play is there. And it doesn't matter whether I record it or anybody else hears it. It's just like, oh, there's just a joy of playing music and hearing music. And that's lovely. But it doesn't need anything, as you said, it doesn't need anything else to be attached to that. So if your motivation for making music is really that you just love making music, like you said, then that's wonderful. There's nothing that needs to be tied into that. You don't need to stop doing that or anything else. It's only the ones that have the attachment. If there's something there that you're doing it for that purpose of getting something from it. And as you said, and as you Timo acknowledged, that even when you do get praise and accolades for it, it never feels right. It's always like, yeah, but, or it doesn't quite scratch the itch. It doesn't fill that hole that needs to be filled, because that's not what you're looking for. So I completely understand that. And it's a very common thing as people start to go through this, to start to lose motivation, and they don't know whether it's, depression or nihilism, or they're losing their motivation in life, or if it's just that, they realize that the things that they were doing to get that ego gratification are no longer useful or necessary, and that they didn't really enjoy doing the things that they were doing. So then you just stop doing it.
Yeah, I think it just comes with these things, these identities falling away, and then you start to, like what I talked about in the beginning, like it's like there is almost nothing left all of a sudden.
Yeah,
you realize that it's just been these phantoms you've been chasing, and perhaps a lot of that is sort of false, and at very least the way I've been doing things, for example music, is just something that I actually don't want to do, or like that is not
exactly,
like something real, and something coming from just the pure joy of here and now, engaging in the activity.
It's also looking into why we chose to do what we did to begin with. Because if you started to create music because mom and dad really truly appreciated little Timo when he did that, then you continue to create music to get the appreciation. And when you then become older and more wise, and you appreciate you in different ways, then you don't need to do that anymore. I have had so many people as clients that came to me at a crossroad in their lives, and so many of them, I mean, remember one, she was a CEO of a billion-dollar company, and like really, and she was just so tired of her life. And during the process that she had, I think it was over 6 months or something like that, she found out that she actually didn't want to be CEO anymore. She wanted to be an organic farmer. And she's always wanted to be an organic farmer, but she couldn't get the appreciation and all of that, people appreciating her and thinking she was amazing if she was an organic farmer. So she became that jet setting CEO, world traveling, all of that, for something completely different than actually liking the job. I had another one, she became an accountant because it was, at that point, it was the most difficult study to get into in Denmark. We have a different system in Denmark in studying, because everything is paid. So she chose deliberately the study that was the most complicated. And then during the process that she was in, she found out that that was the only reason why she wanted to become an accountant. It was for her parents to say that, such a good girl, we really appreciate you. And obviously that never happened. So when she didn't need that approval anymore, she then became, a detox cake baker. So it's really finding out, why are you creating music? Why are you creating your art? What is it in you that is being expressed? What part of Timo is being expressed through your art? And why are you doing it? What is it? Is it scratching that itch that you have? And if it is, then you get the full payout while you make it. And there's nobody on the outside that ever needs to hear it, because it's something you do for you. If other people get to hear it, they can think of the music whatever they want. It's got nothing to do with it, because you have already received.
And is there identification as a musician? Because, you know, that's a cool thing, right? Like, we want to be people. What do you do? Oh, I'm a musician. Oh, that's cool. You know, it's like that kind of thing. Well, I think that's why, because like looking back, well, like you just said, right? Like looking back at, like, I started playing guitar, like really playing guitar when I was 13. And of course, it's like I idolized all of the, you know, Slash and all these guys who like, oh, they look so cool playing, and like, you know, all the girls like them, you know, it's like that kind of thing. And it's like, as a 13-year-old,
Did you start to play guitar to get girls?
not like, again, it's like one of those like under the surface things, right? It wasn't like a conscious decision, but I think there's that like, well, people will really like me if I start to play guitar. And, you know, I think that is like underneath the surface of it. And actually, you know, it was funny too. This is not about you anymore, Timo. This is about me. Thank you for just joining in. When you said about that initial like gratification from the parents thing,
Yeah.
I actually found a cassette from when I was 5 years old. I just found it last year. I had no idea I had it. And I was singing and playing piano, not well, but playing piano. And you know, my family, it was at Christmas when I was 5, and the family is like, yeah, and apparently, and I completely forgot I did this, but I used to like make up songs, and it would be like just random songs that I would start saying about a topic. And my mom was on the recording saying like, do this song about rock and roll or whatever. And it was like, I would just like do this whole like improvised thing about it. And so of course, like I was
you pick university and become a composer.
Exactly. So it's, for instance, the time when I was pre-5, when I was getting adulation for
that decided that you wanted to take music school and become a composer.
Exactly. So thank you for that. So anyway, back to you.
Timo, you're now included in conversation again.
But back to you. But this whole thing about you know, the identity that we put around themselves, because it's so hard when you're giving up $1 billion CEO job or something else, because we have all this ego identification built into I am a CEO, I'm a musician, I'm whatever the identification is. And then is there a fear for you in losing that well, if I'm no longer doing this, now what am I?
Yeah, but like, I think I'm at a point where none of that has any value. Like I've like many times considered just destroying all my data, for example, just all the project files of whatever music I've done, or deleting everything off internet, everything I've released, because it's just meaningless at this point.
But also recognize that that's an unnecessary overreaction. That's like
yeah, probably there is this drama as well.
Exactly.
And like I was considering that seriously like 6 months ago. I was like writing this farewell message. I would you know, just this bitter thing of you know, like I didn't get what I was after.
But that is brilliant, because it's still identification. You're still in the either or, you know. Okay, so now I do not care. Now notice how much I do not care. I'm going to delete everything. That is how much I do not care. I mean, if you truly do not care, you don't need to do anything about it.
Yeah. I think I've just sometimes felt that I need to sort of forcibly just like burn the bridge. Like, I'm not this anymore and I need to be something else. But then again, I don't have any other recourse. You know, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want for most part.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize again that it's like those teenage girls that ignore one another to show how much they do not care. And in that ignoring, they're showing how much they actually care. As long as you need to burn bridges and you need to really emphasize how much you do not do that anymore, you're so doing it. The moment that is just like, Oh my goodness, I have a YouTube channel with lots of music. I completely forgot about that. There's been like 3 months where I haven't even thought about it. That is when you have truly let go of it. So be aware of that either or. There is a middle way where there's no attachment to either sides, and where being in the middle way is not attached to any of the two sides being in a certain way.
It's kind of like going from being like a really hardcore evangelical Christian to being a really hardcore radical atheist. It's like, okay, I've given it up, but then you're still attached to the identification of it's just as much religiosity in that as there was in the other one. You've just taken an opposite stance.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
So I just called you a teenage girl, and Todd just called you a religious fanatic. I mean, you're going away with a lot today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Aren't you glad you came?
I am now blessed.
Now I'm really curious to hear how this is taking you. What would happen if you're just in that space of, because there's also that part of the nihilism with it, you know, it.
Yeah, a lot of that apathy.
Yeah. And to me, I just see a repetition of that, all what you talked about previously, all those periods with depression, that depression is so nihilistic.
And that whole nihilism is still, it's exactly the same thing as that reverse religious fanaticism, where you have the drive for meaning most of the time, and then you fall into that nihilism, which is the anti-meaning. But it's from exactly that standpoint that meaning has a purpose, that you know, you still need life to have a purpose, whether it's that it has a meaning or it has no meaning. They're still opposites of the same coin. Exactly.
Starting point.
So
yeah, so you are kind of like being passionate still about life, but in a different way.
With a minus in
very involved.
Yeah, exactly. With a minus in front of it. Yeah. So I'm very curious to how it is to be Timo, where without the attachment to either or, you know, but just in that a bit like what we talked with Suni about, noticing how much is the Timo suit and all the identification with it, and how much is the other part where it's just being. So when you create music, like Todd was talking about, it's just sitting with your instruments and experiencing the sound and the feeling in the fingers and the
just the joy of hearing new sounds come out. That's wonderful. But if there's anything else attached to that, like I should be recording this now, or you know, whatever, then you recognize that there's something else more to it. And if you don't want to do it anymore, then that's fine. And recognize that you don't have to do something for that other purpose. It's
to be acknowledged as a citizen of the planet.
And it's okay to not know. You know, we have this thing like, by the time you're in high school, you should know what you want to do with your life. And by the time you're out of high school or out of college, whatever, you damn well better know what you're doing with your life. And if at any point after that, you decide that it's time to make a change or this isn't working, that's very scary. So I understand that, you know, inherent fear of what am I, what do I do if I don't do this thing, now what? And there's instead of seeing it as this, you know, scary vacant opening that you don't know what it is, look at it as this, you know, fecund, fruitful possibility. Like it's just this open path that it could be anything. You know, it just hasn't formed yet. And so be open to whatever does seem to be a really potent you know, source of bliss, or you know, that's kind of the Joseph Campbell way of saying, you know, follow your bliss. But it's like whatever it is that feels really good to you without the additional need for having it be for having it be serving some ulterior motive for you.
Yeah, it's just that most of the time nothing much feels like anything. So
that sounds very much like the anhedonia, the you know, depressive sort of nihilism.
Yeah, I know that place.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's
But it's also it's very homely, you know. It's not disturbing. It's so familiar, perhaps a bit too familiar.
Mm.
So
yeah.
it's like sometimes somebody asks me how I'm doing, and I just say, you know, just same old, being depressed, and they might feel sorry for me, but then I'm like, no, don't. It's normal for me, you know, like for somebody who has not been depressed so much of their life, they don't realize how normal it can be.
Yeah.
It's not some crisis that's happening.
But then is it being depressed or is it just being you?
What's the difference?
Yeah, exactly, because if it is being depressed, that means that there's also a non-depressed Timo that you can strive to be. But if this is just, I mean, Todd is super neurotic,
Super neurotic.
and I don't think that he's super neurotic. I just think he's Todd. So what
Yeah.
if the
Yep.
Timo is not the depressed Timo, but this is just Timo. This is just
Yeah, so you are kind of perhaps I interpret saying why label it, you know, that's just what it is,
exactly.
right?
But you're putting a label on it that might be, you know,
Yeah,
the way that bodysuit is viewing the world. It's through, you know, yeah, Charlie Brown filter,
It's a good filter.
you know.
Yeah.
yeah. I think a lot of times I may not even do that. Just saying, you know, life to the question of how I'm doing. It's just, you know, ups and downs. It's just usual. You know, like I don't a lot of times feel like saying anything specific because it doesn't, I think, doesn't appear like that to me. The details don't usually matter so much.
I think the real question is, does your sort of baseline way of living, that baseline, what we call a depressive filter, does that do you want or need that to change? Is there something um the word is keeps slipping away from me. Like, is it dysfunctional for you? Is there something where you feel like it's really creating difficulties in your life?
No, that's like saying water is making difficulties for a fish. No,
Well,
it's you know, it's me, it's what my reality, how it happens here and now, and I I think I used to feel or think like that some years back, but at some point I just gave up. I I I am powerless to do anything about it. It it's just it's my reality. It's my path, uh, my life, and perhaps someday it changes. Perhaps it doesn't. But I don't feel I need to or I can do anything about it.
Still hear duality.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean when I say that I still hear a duality? That it's still like there's a Timo that is, but Timo accepts that it is as it is. But there's also an improved version of Timo that potentially could happen, but it's not happening right now. There's like a non-acceptance of.
Yeah, it's like a half acceptance.
Yeah. It's super interesting. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I feel quite divided a lot of times. Like
Yeah.
at one level, at some moments, I can see, you know, and know a lot, but then other times yeah, like sort of between worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
I'm thinking so many things at the same
yeah,
time.
I know.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. if you're in a place like what we were talking about in the meditation to begin with, when you're in that sort of thoughtless space where like I was talking about with Suni, where it's like, you have the sort of meat suit identification and then the just raw direct experience. If you're in that just raw direct experience, does depression exist? And is there does that sort of thing that we take to be the depressive Timo, is that still in existence?
Well, it depends on what you take as the depressed state. This may be something we talked about last week, but something I've come to realize is that a lot of times when I feel a certain way physically, like I wake up in the morning and I feel groggy and my body aches and so on, then a lot of my life I have thought, that is it, like I'm old and I'm depressed and just always feeling like this, and how can I do anything in life and so on. But I think that has grown weaker, that sort of association, that it doesn't really need to mean anything, or I don't need to label it. So that's something that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
And notice that every aspect of that, though, is a thought. The actual raw experience of it isn't even being tired or groggy. That's still in comparison to some other state that you're remembering.
Yeah.
Actual raw experience in any given situation is just the raw experience. And if you're putting on those labels, and especially those, okay, well, I'm groggy and I feel and I ache. Okay, that is in comparison to, I remember when I was young and vital and felt so good and had so much energy. So now, this is the way it's always going to be. I'm over the hill and all that. Every bit of that is just another thought that's being believed, right? So let all of that get sort of peeled off and fly into the wind, and just keep coming back to the actual raw experience. And in that moment of just raw direct experience, what are the hallmarks of what we're considering to be depression, or even just a quote unquote depressed way of life, or just that being your daily thing? What in that direct experience can be felt that gives you that impression that there is perennial depression? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, well, like, I think obviously there is nothing to that effect with just a raw sensation.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you, like Todd said, it was what I was trying to explain before, that when you wake up and you have a feeling of ache, you don't even know that you have a feeling of ache if you're not comparing it with anything. It's like you just said, that when people ask you how you're doing and you have that feeling, well, there's no difference whatsoever, then that is not the depressive Timo. It's just how it is right now. And it can't even be explained. I love when the best thing you can do to annoy Vince, who has the Sunday meetings, it's ask him, how are you doing? It's the biggest annoyance you can ask him. He goes into a complete tantrum when you do that, because you cannot answer the question. You cannot answer the question because there's no comparison with anything. There's just an expression. How are you doing? I feel my foot under Todd's leg. That's the answer. I feel his hair on my fingers. Now I feel my heartbeat and my breathing. There's no answer to the question when people ask you how are you doing, because we have to go into a comparison space or state.
Yeah, it's like right away sort of a challenge that I want to engage in the human drama with you. Let's start to throw the ball back and forth.
That's such a good way to put that.
I love that. Yeah.
Really good. Really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love for you, until we meet again, to have that completely raw experience of everything, where there's not a label saying that you are something, depressed or musician or hungry or tired or aching. That label is off, and it's just in the moment experiencing what is happening right now, and seeing how little you can actually describe what is experiencing if you're not adding a thought to it.
And that's where freedom is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, you're just suggesting this as a sort of a theme to pay attention to, or might there be, some practical steps?
Yes. Every time you have a thought about depressed Timo, or wanting to, I can't make music anymore, or anything like that, ask yourself the question, are you sure? Because whenever you have a thought about something being in a certain way, it's just a thought. It's not reality. And so questioning everything.
And then come back to the body immediately and feel in your direct experience, what is it right now that feels like depression? What is it that feels right now like a Timo who has to delete all of, all of the music
ever
and
made.
everything?
Yeah.
Like, what is it in that moment that is actually giving any of that, any sort of validation of truth, or any indication that this has to be here, or I have to do this thing, other than a thought? What else is actually there in that experience?
Yeah.
And do you have to trust that thought? Is that thought real?
Exactly. Are you sure?
Exactly.
I need to delete all this to be free. Are you sure? I'm achy today. Are you sure? You can't be achy today, unless you're comparing to a day where you weren't. So what is actually your experience right now?
So something that's like I wonder about is this sort of questioning, like asking, "Are you sure?" Because that's another thought.
Yes.
So I start to, I might start to sort of wrestle with, so like I think what I'm wondering about is why not simply draw the attention to the body? Is it a good idea to start to play that game?
And
Yeah.
don't, if you do the "are you sure," just don't answer it. it's not asking for a verbal answer. Like, I used to use a similar one. Just anytime that I recognized I was lost in thought, I would just say, is this happening right now?
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, right, I'm having a conversation with somebody 5 hours from now, or going over the email that you wrote 3 weeks ago, or whatever it is. Like, is this happening right now? Oh, no, the person is not here. The email is not here. None of what has been going on that seemed so pressing in the mind is here right now. And it just snaps you out of it. And so you don't have to say, no, it's not actually, I'm doing, you don't have to answer it. It's just a thing to wake you up and make you question that that's not actually a true thing, that you've been lost.
Okay.
Yeah, no, goodness. Do not create a new story or a new concept on top, or a new belief on top of the belief that you're just trying to dissolve. Yeah. That wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, tricky.
Yeah, yes. It is.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing that. Yeah.
We'll see.
Exactly. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.